Hello, welcome to Legal Action. My name is David Siegel. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to be talking about bankruptcy and the financial situation of many Americans and what we're going through right now in this country. Joining me, as always, my co-host Jesse Barrientes. How you doing, Jesse?
Very good, Dave. How about yourself?
I'm doing well, and we have a special guest, Bernice Burns from Chicago. Bernice, welcome to Legal Action.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Well, Bernice, you are in the community. You're on the west side of Chicago. You're pretty much in touch with what's happening in the community, as well as working in a bankruptcy law firm. Just give us a general picture of what's happening right now as we head into the final part of the year here with the residents.
Well, it's been quite a struggle. Times has changed tremendously, and economy, oh my God, it's awesome. It's off the hook because people are really struggling very hard now. So they're going to the payday loan stores, taking out these loans with their high interest rate, and it's hard to get out of debt once you've been into once you go into the payday loan store, because they make you all these promises saying you're going to have a low, interest rate payment, and you can pay it back at a certain length of time, knowing that it's hard once you go in that store. It's hard to get a zero balance.
And a payday loan, you're assuming the person has a job, because if they don't have a job, they can't go and get a payday loan, correct?
That is correct.
So what about all the people that are unemployed or not working or not able to work at all? What do they do?
Well,
There's other places they go, right?
I'm sure probably to a loan shark. I don't know.
I'm referring to pawn, if they have.
Yeah,
The jewelry and stuff like that.
Jewelry and stuff. Yeah, they'll go to the pawn shop, and to get money to make ends meet.
Well, the people that do the payday loans, it's not just one or two loans. Sometimes it's 3 or 4, right?
Exactly.
Or 5, or even then the title loans as well.
Yeah, the rollover.
The rollover.
Explain how that works to our viewers, Bernice, how a payday loan works.
Okay, payday loan works. When you go into the store, you got to fill out your application. You got to let them know how long you've been on the job, because I'll let them know if you have any type of valuable assets. But you have to make sure that you're going to pay those payments on time, because if you don't pay those payments on time, they accrue interest on them, and the rates go up on you. And this is something that they tell you, but it's in that little fine print. So, you have to really read through this to understand it. And it's best not to even get started going to the payday loan stores, because it's a situation where you never get ahead.
And nobody really reads the fine print. But also, I've heard situations where they'll make you write out a whole bunch of post-dated checks, or they'll even do a voluntary garnishment, right, against your account or even against your job.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think the problem is it was intended to be a short-term loan just till the next payday, but in reality it's turned into a constant rollover where you're constantly paying interest, renewing the loan, and then eventually you have to either pay the piper or you have to file some form of bankruptcy to get the creditor to stop.
Exactly.
Well, can you discharge a payday loan, can't you?
You can. There are some issues with regards to fraud if you take out a payday loan right before you file. But typically, the payday loan company is not going to object to your bankruptcy because the dollar amount is just not enough. They're usually in the $500 to $1,500 range. And by the time you file your complaint, hire an attorney, and actually litigate the issue,
Not worth it.
you're pretty much done. But let's talk about the pawn situation, because that's another one where I see people constantly rolling over each week or month and paying additional interest. Explain how the pawn works.
Well, you go in the pawn shop and they look at your merchandise, to see how much it's worth, and they'll offer you a certain amount of money on it.
Okay, that's a good point. What will they offer you as a percentage? So if an item is worth $1,000, what are they willing to give you in pawn value?
Probably a couple $100.
A couple hundred, exactly.
Okay, so why is this a good option for people if they're getting so little on their money?
Sometimes they don't have any other choice, and they a lot of times they pawn their merchandise and they won't even go back to get it, because if you let it stay in there month after month, the interest constantly goes up. $5 a month. Say you put it in there 1 month and you be like, okay, the next month this is gonna start, the $5 interest is gonna start accruing on it, and then after that it keeps going up. It never come back down to what you got, when you went in the pawn shop to get the money. Once they gave you that money, then they don't tell you that it's gonna, you're gonna have to pay this back what you borrowed on top of some.
How long before you don't get your stuff back? Is there a time limit?
Yes, sometimes they'll give you a year. They give you a year. If not, they put it out in the, in the case, and they sell it. It'd be up for option.
So you could actually buy your stuff
buy it
back at a premium if you really wanted the
I
item.
know very little. I mean, this is something that's new to me. I don't know very much about that, but I've talked to people that goes there a lot.
Well, Dave, that's a secured debt, isn't it?
Yes, it's basically a bailment, but you have to abide by the contract. Otherwise, they can at some point put it out for sale to a third party, and you lose your item.
So even if you did a bankruptcy, Chapter 7, and you were eligible in other ways, you're not going to get your property back without paying the piper.
That's right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
'Cause
Usually people pull it out before they file a bankruptcy. They find some way because they don't want to lose the item. We need to talk about a third storefront business that's also hurting people. We've talked about the payday loan. We've talked about the pawn shop. But let's talk about title loans on vehicles.
Oh yeah, that's.
I mean, you know a
another
little bit
one.
about this, Bernice. Explain to the viewers what a title loan is.
A title loan is when you take your title into the title loan facility, and you tell them how much money, you would like to get. But they look at the vehicle. They come out and look at your vehicle, see how many miles is on the car, see what condition the car is in, and they determine from there.
So you
how
actually
much they-
you sign your title over? Is that how that works?
You sign your title over to the title loan people.
And
exactly,
they just hang on to it.
until
Well,
you pay them.
There's some recording fees that go along with that.
They do a UCC?
Yes, when you're paying an additional fee because they're not just holding your title, they're becoming the title holder, and they have a lien now, so they are perfecting their lien, and you have to pay those fees obviously when you want to get your title back.
Because if you don't, and they were just hanging on to your title, there's nothing to prevent you from ordering a replacement title.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Exactly. And another problem with the title loan is that you have to have a paid-off vehicle. So let's say you've got a car that originally started at a $20,000 debt, and you've got it down to $2,000. You're not going to get a loan. You have to have it paid off. You have to be able to
Exactly, in
give
order
clean
give
title.
them the title.
So that limits how many people they can deal with. But a lot of those stores are also offering short-term loans for people who don't have a title.
But they'll also repossess your car, can they not?
They can. They really don't want to do that, though. The last thing the title company wants is your vehicle back. They want the money.
Yep.
But if you leave them no other option, they will repossess your vehicle. And then we can talk about different ways to get that back under Chapter 13. But I see those three storefront businesses really hurting people because they seem like good options for people, but they're really not when you think about the interest. What are some of the other things that people are doing that are getting themselves in trouble, aside from that?
That's about it. That's about all I know about it. The title loans, the payday loan
about
stores, and the
gambling?
punch. Oh yeah, casinos. Very much so. They go into the casinos thinking perhaps they could, get lucky. Just like playing the lottery. It's a hope and a win. Hoping that you could come up and win big so that you can get out of your debt. You know what I'm saying? But, I mean, that's a long shot. Nothing is guaranteed. It's guaranteed that you can lose, but it's not guaranteed that you're going to win.
Right. And people
you
who are in
know.
debt, Jesse, they're not just gambling what they have to gamble. They're writing checks.
Right.
They're taking cash advances at the casinos.
They're even the credit card, using the
Right,
credit card.
right. They're doing
Exactly.
things to incur
Max
more
them
debt.
out.
Yep.
And it's very addictive. And when people lose, they think, well, if I just play a little bit more, I can now recover, I can win. And
What a loss.
sometimes you find somebody who loses, tens and $20,000 at a casino, and they have no choice but to file a bankruptcy after that to get a fresh start.
Exactly.
Well, you could say the same thing if you're talking about other vices in terms of drinking and cigarettes and all the other
Cigarettes,
stuff. I mean,
exactly.
what does
Yeah.
a pack of cigarettes cost? $9, $10 for a pack?
But like
if you know.
$10
Yeah, yeah.
now for a pack
Right.
of cigarettes.
Well, a lot of people are going to Indiana for cheaper gas, cheaper cigarettes, but you got to be careful too because there's the vices over there with the gambling and things like that in Indiana too.
Everywhere.
It is just about
you.
everywhere. In fact, it's within 20 minutes of this studio we're sitting at right now, so you really can't get away from it. But what you could try and do is try and budget, try and record what you spend per month, what you bring in per month, and try and make changes where you can to your budget. Maybe you can cut down a little bit on the cable, cut down a little bit on the cell phone, cut down a little bit on the food, maybe conserve the gas a little bit. There's certain things you can do to save yourself a little bit. But the bottom line is you have to watch it.
People sometimes they're just in this routine, okay? And I've seen this a lot of times when people come in. It doesn't matter if they make a little, they make mid-range, or they make a whole lot. They're in the same situation. If you give somebody who doesn't have a whole lot of money and you give them a ton of cash, $1 million, they're going to be probably in a worse position in the next 6 to 8 months or so because they don't know how to manage that money. And you make a really good point there in terms of everybody should know a few things. You should know how much you make from your job, how much you're paying in taxes, what your exemptions are. You should know what your bills are, how much the mortgage is, and everything else. And I think that once you see it on paper, that's a whole different thing. But it's inconvenient. People don't want to do that, and people just basically want to do what they want to do.
They want to do. Exactly.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the what people are making, because what I see with a lot of my clients is they are having too much being withheld from their pay so that they'll get a huge refund come tax time.
So forced savings or
Right.
forced, yeah.
But what they're doing by doing that is they're cutting off what they really would be earning per pay period. So they're kind of putting themselves in a bind, and what they're really doing is they're letting the government have this money interest-free, because when they get the refund, they're not getting it with interest. They're just getting it back. So it is a forced savings, but I think if people actually took out the proper amount and weren't relying on that refund, they would be better off throughout the entire year instead of just having a wealth of money for one lump sum, which they usually
It only comes
misspend.
once a year.
That's interesting, Dave, because when you owe your taxes and you don't pay by a certain date, you do get interest and penalties and all those wonderful things.
Right. Well, the government is quick to charge you interest, but they're not going to pay you interest. That's the way that works. So I think people should adjust their withholding so that they're not giving the government their money for free all year to hold, and then they get a huge refund.
That's exactly right.
We've seen so many clients over the years that have lost their refund to a bankruptcy trustee, to a Chapter 13 trustee.
Because they let it build up because they did not taken the appropriate amount of the exemptions.
Right. So other than that, Bernice, you've got people out of work.
Yes.
You've got people struggling to pay their mortgages, to pay their rent.
Pay their
You do have
child's
people.
school tuition. I mean,
Okay.
there's a lot of different things out there.
There's a lot of women going without child support, and men too, that they're entitled to. They're trying to raise children on their own, which is very difficult.
Right.
There are some government programs, though. There are people that are on different forms of aid that do help. Can you talk about some of those types of checks?
I have no interest in. I mean, I don't know a lot of people that's on the that receives government assistance. Some folks I know, they get with a link card. That helps them out, but sometimes that's not even worth it. I mean, what's $12 that the government gonna give you? What can you go to the grocery store to buy for $12 worth of with a $12 link card? Come on,
Right.
Yeah.
What about
It's
Section
not
8
worth
housing,
it.
though? That is a big help to people who don't have to pay a huge
That's
rent.
a great help. That Section 8, low housing income, that helps a lot of people tremendously because the government pays so much of their rent, when they can't afford it. I mean, and it's a program. It's a good program to be on because they put you in a decent apartment, and you might have to pay your utilities, one or the other, maybe the gas or the light. But the rent is paid. The government paid the majority of that for you, so that's a big help, to some of the people out here that's struggling, single parents.
Yeah, at least you have
That's
your
right.
rent paid for.
And the landlords are held to a strict standard. They have to maintain those properties.
Oh
They
yes,
can't
they
let
have
it go
to be
into a
up to
slum.
standards. Exactly. You can't have a slumlord, that's for sure, because they
There's
do
a lot of those.
inspections. Yes,
Yeah.
they do inspections, and if they don't pass the Section 8 inspections, then they're not going to let the people move in. You know what I'm saying? Because the government figure, well, we're not going to pay this landlord $1,200 or $1,300 a month, and the conditions is not up to standard, the billing codes, So those are some of the things you have to look at.
Yeah, the other main benefit, Jesse, would be SSI, which is a Social Security supplement.
If you can get it.
For people who don't have the ability to work, they might have a disability, physical or mental, and they're not able to support themselves, they can get a benefit called SSI, which does help sustain people for as long as they need it, which is a wonderful program if it's not abused.
Although it's, what you get is not, not a whole lot. But the other programs too, for people with children, they provide, or they give you a stipend for your daycare and for other things, babysitter, or even, I've even seen cases where, you have somebody to clean your house, although I'm not so sure, about that exactly. But, they're just wherever the need is, but it's never enough.
Right. I think most people would prefer to have a good paying job for their own pride and self-esteem, and to be able to take care of themselves and their family, as opposed to relying on some kind of governmental program, because eventually it all comes down to jobs. We have to create things in this country. We have to keep the ball rolling. We have to export things. We have to be able to put people to work other than just fast food. It seems like we're a food industry country all of a sudden here, where that's all we really do is we shuffle money around based on our food.
Well, Dave, there's also an attitude of entitlement. Now, people, talk about all different kinds of things in terms of, I've worked for this and worked for that. And again, you mentioned, if something's not abused. I've talked to other people who, for example, are on unemployment. And sometimes the mentality is, well, yeah, I can get another job, but you know what, I'm making the same amount on unemployment. Why should I work? Why should I be a productive member of society? Those are the things that are troubling, and I'm not sure what to do, what they need to do to fix it, but that's not something that, that's very, very attractive.
That's true.
Exactly.
Bernice, what do you see about the unemployment in the neighborhoods in Chicago? I know it varies based on the location, but are you seeing a lot of people that are trying to get jobs who just cannot?
No, in the neighborhood where I live, I don't see people really struggling trying to get jobs. Because you got different strokes for different folks, I should say. You got your people out there trying to hustle and doing things illegal, and it does only two things for them: it get them put in jail or put in the grave. And it shouldn't be to that point, but the industry with the drugs out here nowadays. A lot of young people turn to that, thinking, this is the way. They don't even try to go look for a job.
But it's not just that too, because sometimes, after they do that, they get hooked up on it. Now
exactly
they're dependent, right?
And exactly. Then you got the people that come home from jail that's been incarcerated. They can't get a job, because they got their background on them. I've known a couple of people to come home from jail, young men, and actually started working like 1 or 2 months. And then all of a sudden, employer do a background check and fires the guy. Well, why didn't you do that background check, when you first had that person to fill out the application, let them get that first and second check, and then all of a sudden you fire them? Give them a chance. They need to build themselves up. Give them a chance. They paid their debt to society. If they working and they willing to, try to provide for themselves, opposed to going getting on public assistance, give that individual a chance.
There are some county programs that do specifically cater toward people with a felony record. And I'm not sure exactly what kind of jobs they are, but they welcome people with that. Of course, you have to pass other background type of things, but there is hope for somebody who does have, hey, you made a mistake, true enough, okay? The important thing is to pick yourself back up and to try to get back on track.
Exactly,
Yeah,
because
that's
you
true.
fall down, but you get back up again.
There are companies that will hire people to do factory work or warehouse work, even some food service work, with a background. They're going to monitor them. They're going to keep a close eye on them to make sure they're not doing drugs. They might even have to be tested. They don't want, obviously, that going on in their workplace for numerous reasons. But yeah, people do get afforded an opportunity if they seek it out. But unfortunately, there's a lot of people that give up, and they stop looking, and they feel desperate, and they feel like they can't do it, and then they just look for some sort of either fast money, like you're talking about, Bernice, or living on some kind of assistance. So it's a tough go out there. It really is.
But when you have your back to the wall, and I guess the problem is, okay, if you don't have a job, you don't have to worry about the creditors because there's nothing for them to get. Okay?
Exactly.
And for a lot of people that are, and I've talked to a lot of people that have come in, the amount of money that they're making is so nominal that they're not going to, they're essentially judgment proof. They're going to get harassed, true enough, but they're not, their creditors, their judgment creditors are not going to be able really to garnish anything from their wages. And then so that brings you to maybe, the next level up there, or somebody who's got a little bit better job and who's gotten behind and done some of those things to be able to clear things up for them.
Right, but some of the street creditors are more dangerous. If you've borrowed money from people in the neighborhood.
Well, that's not dischargeable,
And-
Dave, right?
Exactly.
And you're not paying them back in
Yep,
the ordinary
yep.
course.
That's a little different.
You're at risk for some other things
Right.
in terms of retribution, which is even worse than owing a credit card. So you have to be careful who you borrow from, whether or not you're going to pay them back, because that's when things start happening to your car and things like that. Right?
family
Can you talk about
members.
that a little bit, Bernice?
I don't know much about this, so I can't comment on that. I'm not in a category like that, thank God, not with my family members, so I
Right,
can't
but
comment on
my point
that.
is, word gets out around the neighborhood when someone is not paying back. Word gets out, and then no one wants to lend that person anymore, and they get a bad reputation. That's all I'm talking about.
Yeah, they get a bad reputation, but sometimes they get a pumpkin head on top of that, too.
Okay.
Well,
Beat
the other
down is what you're
beat
talking
down.
about, yeah.
The other thing, right,
Okay.
is family. Okay,
Yes.
so this is what I've
Yes.
learned. What I've learned is if you're gonna lend money to family, you might as well just make it a gift, because probably not going to happen anyway, and you're going to save yourself a whole lot of stress
Yes.
if you just let it go.
Exactly.
And do it that
And
way. But
count
again,
it
hey,
as a
family's
loss.
family. What are you going to do?
Okay. So we've talked about some of the reasons why people are in debt. We've talked about the situation in the community. Let's just briefly touch upon a good way to get out of it if you need it. Okay. What I'm talking about is Chapter 7. Jesse, you want to tell a little briefly about what Chapter 7 bankruptcy would do for someone in this situation?
Sure. Chapter 7 is essentially a fresh start. It allows somebody who qualifies to be able to discharge all of their unsecured debts 100%. There's been situations where somebody might have a home, but they might not have a whole lot of equity in that home. And as long as they don't owe anything on it and they're within that limit, they could still do a Chapter 7 and to keep kind of what they have, the roof over their head. The same would apply to an automobile that they have, as long as they're up to date on it. And let's face it, people need, whether or not the car is upside down or not, they need a vehicle to get back and forth to work. And so they could, what they say, kind of reaffirm on that vehicle, which means even though they could right now give it back and not be responsible for it or any debt whatsoever, they're agreeing to comply with the essential original terms of the agreement and keep the car. But that means that, hey, it's out of the bankruptcy, it's reaffirmed, and it's too bad, so sad if you get in trouble with that vehicle. But it's a good way for people to get that fresh start. Problem is, and I've seen people who come back every, it's 8 years in a day, but they come back for another bankruptcy because, they've gone out and kind of maybe haven't learned the lesson before. I understand it's tough out there and it's hard, but you got to learn, not to be in that situation again. You can turn it around.
Right. Bernice, you've worked closely with people who have gone through the process from being in debt to filing to getting out of debt. Speak a little bit about what their situation is like once they come out of bankruptcy. How is life for them?
For some people, it's good. For others, I would say it's bad, because I know of individuals that went through the bankruptcy and said, well, I'm glad that I don't have that credit card debt anymore. But yet they went right back out there and they got the credit cards. Got more than what they had before they got into the bankruptcy and filed that Chapter 7, So you right back at square one, something that you promised yourself, I'll never get into again. So one thing, people should never say never. Say, oh, I'll never do that again. That's because it was all fine and dandy when you got that fresh start and you got that discharge letter saying, oh, I'm free from this. I don't have to worry about this anymore. But yet when those credit card individuals started sending you those applications and telling you, oh, we're going to give you a $300 credit limit, and then we're going to increase it to $500, then it's going to go up to $1,000. Oh, that sounds good. Now you want to go back on the shopping spree. That's what got you into the situation the very first time. It's like a tricky situation. And what's the big deal with having a credit card? You just got out of debt. Have one card, a debit card. put money on there when you want to, you know what I'm saying, you want to use it and pay that back. You don't need a credit card for every day of the week.
Well,
you know,
a lot of folks, when you're talking about that, hey, you get your debts discharged, and now all that's off my back, and so guess what? I got a little play here, little stuff. But I can tell you though, quite honestly, that a credit card can be a valuable tool, just like you were talking about earlier. And you don't claim the amount of exemptions, the government gets the use of your money, interest and tax free and everything else. If you use the credit card and you pay your balance when it's due, you're using the credit cards, the credit card company, they hate me because that's what we do, but you get points. So you've got to spend the money anyway, so you might as well get a little something along with it. It's also convenient for having the direct pay or different kinds of things that you have to do. Sometimes you get a quick break on it, but you have to be disciplined and able to pay it back completely every single time. But it's really easy to say, oh well, I can buy that. You just whip out your card and forget about the consequences
that goes along with it.
After a fresh start filing, Bernice, how soon can someone get a credit card, or 2 or 3?
I would say right after they've got their discharge papers, but then again, no, I think that's wrong. Strike that. Right after you get your discharge letter, you start getting applications in the mail. It's like they know that you're finna get discharged, and they start sending you these applications through the mail like a month after that.
So it's kind of preying on you.
Exactly.
And they know you're not going to be able to do another Chapter 7 for 8 years
For
and a day.
8 years and a day.
Yep.
Be like,
well, you have to
come
be
on.
strong and look at the agreement and see what the interest rate is, see if there's an annual fee. You want to try and resist it for as long as you can, go on a cash basis. At least that's what I advise my clients, because I don't want to see them fall into that same trap. The credit card is addictive. They feel like they need
True.
it. It's whatever the credit limit is, it's there for you to take, whether or not you have the ability to pay it off in 30 days or not, until you realize I just stepped in it again. So you have to be very careful. And credit cards is the thing.
I know of someone that did that, just got out of Chapter 7, and she called me, and now she's back in debt over $10,000. I'm like, well, how many credit cards do you have? She was like, I have about 7 or 8. And some have $1,000 after her bankruptcy, after the Chapter 7. Some have $1,000 limit, some $2,500. Well, that's because she was making her payments on time and paying them more than the minimum payment that they require you to pay. So that's boosting her up. You know what I'm saying?
And I bet she has more than the credit cards, doesn't she? I bet she has more than credit card debt.
She has about 7 credit card debts. 7 different credit cards, and they total $10,000. Total.
But I'm saying she probably owes other things: payday loans, title loans.
No. Her car's paid for. She does not owe.
Oh, if it's paid for, she can go get a title loan.
Exactly.
So that's dangerous.
But she hasn't considered that. She said she wouldn't do that.
So what is that, Dave? About $10,000? What is that in interest if you just pay the minimum? How long is it going to take you?
It would take you
forever, wouldn't it?
10 or 15 years to pay that off.
And cost you more than the $10,000.
Yeah. Sure. So I think the lesson here is be careful with credit. Make a budget. Try to avoid the different places that are hurting you. Okay? All right, Jesse.
Very good.
Thanks for joining us. Bernice,
you.
thanks for being a special guest
Thank you so
today.
much.
Thanks for having me.
My name is Dave Siegel. We'll see you next time on Legal Action. Take care. Bye-bye.